I'm Mark Paskvan, VP of Operations and Engineering for Wave. You may be wondering, well, what makes you special to be up here? I'm not sure, but I know that I have moved around about 6 times, which at one point I thought was a lot. Now, maybe not as much. But with that, I've had to develop people to take over my position as I've left, and I've had to be developed to move into positions as I've progressed through my career. I've gone through one side where I've had very structural shadowing, be prepared for the job. And I also had a manager give me a keychain with 28 keys, not one of them labeled, and say, here you go, I'm not sure what these go to. So I've been on both sides of the spectrum as far as development. And today, hopefully, Kimberly and I can kind of find that sweet spot of where we can all live from a people leader and people development. So with that, Kimberly.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kimberly Sims. I am the Vice President of HR for Wave. And today I have the wonderful pleasure to share with you some of the experiences through an interview with this guy right here, from learning what you need to do to 28 keys. And we're going to explore the world or the business case for development. As you guys know, employee development is definitely a catchphrase in the workplace. So by definition, it strictly is a cooperative effort between a manager and an employee. And there's an exchange of information in order to improve skills and knowledge. But we know that that work scene is changing quite a bit, and especially in the last 20 months. It's been hugely rapid because of the impact of the pandemic. So work is now getting compressed, so like those timelines are shortening. Our structures are more fluid. I had actually one colleague of mine be described as a Swiss Army knife at one point in time because they had to take on a lot of different things. So structures are getting more fluid. And people are actually craving impact and purpose at work. Our business objectives are being influenced from internal factors as well as external factors. And they're going to change constantly. So today, I have the distinct pleasure to talk to this guy to get get perspective about Wave's business leaders. And we're just going to explore a few aspects about development and why it's really worth the investment. So, Mark, I got a ton of questions for you. All right, so you ready?
Yep.
All right, we're ready to shoot. All right, so for the first question that we have here, throughout your career, how have you seen development just go through an evolution?
Sure. So I joined Dietrich in 2005, and that time development was very transactional, right? It was this one-time thing. Go take an Excel class, then come back and do an Excel spreadsheet. Go take a lean class, come back, run a lean event, and then 3 months later we'd say, go run a lean event, and you get that look like, oh, a little rusty, I've only done one. So there wasn't this culture of continuous improvement. The other was it was very employee-driven, right? It was that pull system, open door policy, someone knocks on your door, hey, I want to learn this new skill set. We didn't really attach it to which direction the business is going. Is it a hypo? Is it not? Are we trying to get a new skill set? It was just, yeah, if you want learning, let's do it. And the other was, this old saying of, learn by getting your feet in the fire, all right? A lot of us learn that way. It's not a very highly successful way to go about it. The success of survival of the fittest is not always kind of survival of the best. And so over the course of the years, you've seen a lot of different modes of delivery of development. E-learning, micro-learning, gamification, things that have gotten away from that group, and I'm talking to a group of training here, but getting away from that mass, pull everyone together, do a one-day training, and then out. And so the bright spot of COVID, and as we look for new job seekers and training internally, there's a sensational desire to learn and to build a new skill set, not only for status quo today, but what is it for the future? And I think that's been a major evolution of this business. It used to be, well, learn the skill set because it'll allow you to do your job better. Well, no, that's not the case. Now it's, yeah, you can help your job, but it gives you more tools for your tool belt for the next one. I remember conversations with people leaders back in the day of, hey, we need to take a lateral move. And right, it was always a negative. It was a frown upon of, oh, I should go up, up, up. Now those conversations are different. We're a much agile workforce. We move from sales operations, engineering to NPD, and vice versa. And we become these skilled labor that is very diverse in our communication and very collaborative. So from an organization, if you invest in the reskilling, the upskilling, and that internal mobility, that's where you get a competitive advantage. And so I think that's where we are today, is how do we build our leaders for the future to make them successful today, but also give them the skill set to move up in their professional careers and support our business as we grow.
Well, moving from the tactical to the strategic, love it, love it. Is there a way we can go back to the Mentimeter with the LinkedIn study? Did you guys have a chance to take the poll? Maybe it didn't work. Oh, well, there you go.
Hey!
Oh, there we go. All right, it's growing, it's growing. All right, I think the responses are coming in. I love technology.
Michonne, you can use both phones for
You can
help us get more results.
Yeah, get more results going. Well, it looks like everyone's participating, or some people are participating, and people have selected
70%.
70%. Okay. Well, if you selected D, which was 94%, that is actually the correct answer.
Second place.
Yeah. So 94% employees said that they would stay longer if their employer took an active role. That's huge dividends.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Huge. And in our research, just in preparing for this talk, we looked at Hayes Worldwide Research Group, and they even stated in a study they did in 2019 that 22% of people would actually leave their current job and it's not because of money, if they found an organization that provided opportunity for growth and development. So, I think
it's a serious number there.
Serious number.
Yeah.
And I think we need to continue the conversation around engagement. So we have another poll. So if you haven't voted for the last one, get in on this one. What percentage of American workers would leave their current job for one that has a reputation of investing in employee development? And while you guys are going through that, I got another question for you, Mark.
Let's do it.
All right. Why do you invest in developing in your new people, and what do you take into account when determining that investment?
Yeah, so I think it starts with employee engagement. And again, I'm not telling you something you don't know, but it's important to have employees that are engaged. They have a purpose in their job, they feel valued, and that's where the innovation and the thinking outside the box and cross-collaboration, that's where it comes from. And so you want to create this culture of innovation and evolution. It helps address repetitive work. I don't need a show of hands, but I will assume that not all of us enjoy doing the same thing every single day, right? And as we look at how we become much more collaborative, we're all on teams every single day, we're working in groups outside of our usual business unit. This is how the engagement, elevates an individual from where they are today. We also do it to connect overlapping skills, right? How do you get someone in a room that speaks the same language, talks the same terminology, has empathy for one another on, I get what your job is, I understand what your purpose is, here's what mine, how do we work together? If we don't solve that and we work in silos, or we work as SMEs that are very good at our job but are very narrow, that doesn't align with our business growth, and it doesn't fill some job gaps or some skills gaps that we have today. And so I use an example of looking for the future from a Wave standpoint. Over the last year and a half, we have made a pivot to custom manufacturing. We have always been mass production. It was high volume, best at what we do, tons of stock. That's not the case with our customer anymore. They want Ruby Red, they want Coca-Cola Red, they want a 2 7/8, all those type of things that make it special. And so we've had to pivot. No longer is it the operator that we just need to teach you operator skills. No, now we got to teach you CNC skills, or we need to teach you some changeover skills that you didn't have. Or tool and die, man, it's a lot more complex job than you had before. And so you have to identify what these skill sets are moving forward, and then how do you engage the employees in learning and development to help close that gap. And so I'll use another example. We had a controller in the Las Vegas facility for Wave that came in as a controller. Very strong performer. But you could tell that he had his ceiling. Where do you go from a controller in a plant facility? There's not a lot of upward movement. And he came to me and said, look, I'd really like to get to operations. I have some background from previous employment, and so how do I get there? And so that's when we found out, hey, you know what? This company is really going towards metrics. That was the time of the war rooms. Remember those great war rooms that we had? That we all did about 30 different PowerPoints and everybody looked at 2 of them? Yeah. We told Adam, hey, there's an opportunity for you to slowly get into the operations. Take on the analytics. You're really good at that. From there, that person then moved into the operations. And now, as I was the general manager at the time, moved out, we had a succession plan. We constructed our succession plan through the talent development versus kind of getting to that point and going, all right, let's post it and see what we get. And so that's some of the reasons of why it makes sense to develop our people. So you asked why, how do you know if it's successful? Look, there's no, sweet sauce. It is probably making sure that you align employees' aspirations with what you want to do and where you want the business to go. You want to keep people involved. The second is you want to make sure you align with the long-term strategy of the company. What are the major benchmarks and what are the skills you need to achieve that? And lastly, you just want to provide opportunities to develop within. There's a lot of benefits to taking internal talent, developing it, and moving into a position where they can be successful. Not only does it help the ramp-up period, we all know the struggles it is in recruiting today, but that internal talent already has trust with you, it's trust in the organization, and that's where the success comes from. So to me, there's no metric to say it's a success, but if you can look at those 3 things and say, yeah, we're in a good spot, then it's working for you.
All right, so internal growth, we've got that. We're providing experiential platform for individuals to grow and add value to the organization. And you even provided us an example. So that sounds like utopia. Have you ever been challenged where there have been conflicts or obstacles that prevented you from going through this, wonderful world of development?
Never. No, I was joking.
Well, okay.
Yeah, look, it's not always successful. Again, I think of, we had an electrical engineer at the Wave Las Vegas facility that was a subject matter expert. Great at what he did, but it was all tribal knowledge. And we all have probably worked with someone that has tribal knowledge. How do you get that transfer of knowledge? Because as soon as that unique skill set leaves and that knowledge leaves, it really sets back your operations, it sets back the purpose of the growth of your company. I remember having the conversation, hey, let's put some documentation together. We're gonna set up some development plans. 3 weeks later, no documentation. Oh, well, I'm gonna put this person with you and through osmosis, they will learn the job. Guess what? If you're a subject matter expert, you like being the subject matter expert. You don't always teach other people. So again, we put some plans in place, and then it got to the point as a manager that I was like, we'll just kick it down the road. We'll figure it out at some point. Again, it was a huge risk, and it didn't pan out. We hired 2 different outside electrical engineers. The transition was not positive. They didn't stick around. And it wasn't until we reached out to the Aberdeen facility on the East Coast, and they were currently developing electrical engineer. And so we were able to bring the success that they had, bring it to the Wave Las Vegas facility, and that's where we found our succession plan. But again, it was one of those things where I didn't have urgency as a manager. I figured, well, at some point, we'll figure out how to transfer this person's knowledge. And there was a lack of creativity. I tried the documentation, didn't work. Tried the mentorship, didn't work. And so as you go through, you really have to be creative on how to minimize the risk. And more importantly, identify the risk and make sure you put a plan in place.
All right, so creativity wasn't there, kind of going to the old adage of you'll learn through shadowing, maybe asking a couple of questions, but really not planning or engaging the employees in part of the process. So have you, understanding that there was no lack?
There's way too many questions, Kimberly. Way too many.
Lack of creativity. Can you describe your first experience as a leader, as a people leader, when you had to be creative in the development space because it was just critical? There was just no way that you could advance whatever that objective was.
Yeah. All right, let's stand up for this one.
Okay.
I do better when I move around. A little feedback. Sorry, Adam, you're going to have to move the camera on this one. So we were telling stories about kind of where development has worked. And I think back to early in my career with Dietrich. Again, learning and development isn't a clear path all the time. It's not something you just look at and go, yep, this is going to work here. I was a planner at the Dietrich Booten facility, and I had 3 other planners with me. 3 of us were under 25. We had leadership characteristics, but we weren't leaders then. We didn't know. And if you've ever worked on the Northeast or serviced the Northeast, it is a fast-paced environment. They want their product yesterday type of thing. And we had 6 weeks of 12-hour shifts. We were running 24/7. Everyone had 12-hour shifts. It was a nightmare. Those of you that work in operations, you can imagine the dynamic when everybody is working 12-hour shifts. You're agitated, you're frustrated. As an office support, we had a good relationship, but when you're leaving at 6:30 in the afternoon, 7 o'clock at night, and the team's there at 3 in the morning, you still have a dynamic that's starting. And so I talked to the planners and said, look, we got to do something about this. As leaders, and we're informal leaders, how can we do something different? And we said, hey, pick one day next week when you can come in late at night and support the shift. And I talked to the supervisors, right? And they loved it. Like, oh, thank God for giving us relief. Wink, wink, good luck kind of thing. And so there was a gentleman, Shahid Solomon, on the floor that is the leader on the floor, right? Not in title, but he's the person that people look to see, hey, what does he think about the situation? And Shahid had cornrows, and I had a David Beckham faux hawk at the time. Shahid drove a BMW, I had a Ford. And so we put these boxing posters around the entire facility. Mark versus Shahid, Ford versus BMW. I think Tupac versus Goo Goo Dolls, whatever it was at the time. And come Friday, we asked everyone to sign up for overtime. Up to that point, no one had run overtime those last 2 weeks. I mean, it was just mandatory, you gotta be here. Every single person signed up for overtime that night. And so come Monday night, if you're a Dietrich person, I have some skills as an operator. I can flip a CSJ stud with one hand, but I'm no Shahid. And so it was a really cool environment because it was me versus Shahid, and you had the entire shift chipping in. You had half of them that were determined to make sure that Mark won, and you had half making sure that Shahid kicked my butt. And that's how it turned out. But it was a weird dynamic to kind of create this collaborative, everyone's in it together. It went from a, man, I'm tired of servicing the customer to, hey, let's work together moving forward. If we can make it like this, then that's great. And so again, that was just a creative way to do things different, and it was a way for us to see how to be better leaders on the floor. And I know one of your questions will be, well, how do you know it worked? 3 weeks later, Shahid was running a line that you're setting a record. Back in the day, you used to get like $25 when you set a record. So the worst thing you could do as a planner is to go out there and go, hey, Shahid, we got another order on this line. I need to move you over. And we had to do that. And I sent out one of my supply chain managers or supply chain planners at the time, super nervous, like, oh, Shahid's not going to be happy about it. And we told Shahid, it was like 6 or 7 hours in the shift, and he was like, nah, cool, I appreciate you coming out to me, I'll move over, right? And like that's when I realized, okay, we got a pretty darn good dynamic in place, and we created this circle as planners that have a very face-to-face relationship with the floor on how to be a leader. And it wasn't through a book, it wasn't through training, it was literally just do something different so that people see us visible and that we show empathy and that we try to do things differently on the floor. So to me, I still go back to that was where I learned to be a leader, and that was through a development that we can all do that's different than maybe just the typical process.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you were incorporating your peers, right, through that whole process. So there was some coaching that was going on, peer coaching going on, encouraging concepts, cultural shifts, because there was this bad perception around, trudging through, getting the overtime, and it worked. I mean, as far as that creativity. So I know that we have some statistics here that will kind of support what this investment will look like. So 74, 70, and 37. I know you guys went through the poll, but 74% of employees actually believe that they're not even reaching their full potential in their role. So when you talked about the Paskvan, Mark Paskvan versus Shahid, It was understanding that we needed to elevate the leadership in that particular circumstance to take on, and I think you had shared a little bit more of that story, with taking on responsibility to help execute and get people encouraged and motivated for work. 70%, if you guys, and I think we did pretty well on that poll, most of you guessed right, 70% of American workers would actually leave their current organization for one that has a reputation of investment, whether that investment is the experiential piece that you talked about, or online training, or mentorships like you're having today. I think that this is a creative environment with the whole mentor table deal that equates to that versus situation. And then last but not least, 37% of employees engaged in an active development plan, more likely to be productive and actually stay within an organization. So we know that there are huge benefits with regards to development. You guys here today are going through that process. You're learning how to develop your team, learning what it means for you, okay, causing inspiration, hopefully at the tables. And one of the, well, there's many multiple benefits for it, but consistent job performance, getting people to be more productive, heightened job satisfaction, potential talent movement, whether it's vertical or horizontal in an organization, it's all a win. And there is an added benefit for lowering business expenses. So I think we've all experienced some turnover here in the last couple of months, probably a year or so. But with that turnover, you're not just losing people, you're losing knowledge. So it's just some other things that we need to think about as we're looking at the world of development, which I think you guys are going to be going through several iterations of learning how to do that and coaching, so extremely beneficial. One thing that I'll leave as we transition to the next section is that we need to have intentional investments in our people, okay? Involving experiences that happen inside or external to this organization, or even if it's in this organization, cross-departmental. So what that does for you is gets better buy-in from your workforce. There's a stickiness to it. There's a larger sense of commitment, and also could spark innovation. And those are key elements for the growth of our organization, growth of business and revenue. So we had an opportunity to do a little more research and digging because, again, we're like, are we doing things right? Well, checked out a couple of different organizations just to benchmark ourselves, see where we stood in terms of development. I'll share two with you. Abbott Health, you guys may know them. They do the little kits, the test kits for COVID rapid tests. They actually give their employees the ability to personalize, does that sound familiar? Personalize their experiences based on 6 strength areas. And these 6 strength areas are aligned with their strategic design. So it's forward thinking in the development space. And then in Honeywell's instance, they actually take a core group, and I'll lean in on the engineering program that they offer, the opportunity to be exposed to and train with other departments. And what that allows them to do is to network, like you guys are doing today, with other members of the organization, as well as gain perspective and that empathy that Mark talked about. And it also allows for them to build continuous relationships. So when they have to step into the room as influencers to run a project, they already have buy-in, knowledge, and can speak the terminology that's used within those multiple functions. So that being said, you have been with WAVE for 9 years. And you probably have seen some very exciting programming.
Super exciting.
There, super exciting. So what programs do you believe have been the most impactful, the most creative that we've executed?
Sure. Look, I think it's easy. First thing to start off is just there's no one size fits all, right? You can't tailor learning and development and think it's just going to apply to every single person. People receive messages differently. People like the classroom setting. People like to work shoulder to shoulder. It's knowing your people first and knowing what the right way to connect with them is. With that being said, we have done some creative things that I don't think are earth-shattering or groundbreaking, but certainly what has helped Wave be successful with learning and development is our commitment to it. You know, as I talk about the evolution, it's easy to train someone and then kind of walk away and say, all right, you go own it. But if you don't give them the opportunity to do something with it, then you're kind of back to square one. And so one of the things that we've done is really mentorship opportunities. You know, whether that's peer-to-peer, one-on-one between a manager and their direct report, or even executive coaching. You know, when you're working alongside an expert or you're working alongside someone you have a relationship with, it's a lot easier to digest information. You have that trust, you have that familiarity. And so that's where there's an opportunity to, you know, really have a touch point. You know, I imagine a few of you are looking at me and going, hey, mentorship sounds great, but I don't have time for mentorship. Mentorship doesn't have to be this 3, 4, 6 hour commitment. It just needs to be touch points. You know, during one-on-one, what are you struggling with? Where do you have challenges? What skills do you wish you had that I can help out with? You know, if you just have frequent touch points, that's a mentorship that goes a long way, and that shows the commitment. The other is shadowing opportunities. And I think for Worthington, you call it Ditlow's Day in the Life of. We've used that specifically for floor operations mostly. You know, how do you have an operator shadow maintenance and understand what they're doing? How do you have maintenance shadow an engineer or shadow HR? You know, we talk about kind of this empathy and, you know, knowing what the job is. You know, a lot of times an operator wants to be in maintenance. It's a higher grade level. It's higher pay. But do they really know the skill sets that are needed to be successful in that position? You know, shadowing has been a great opportunity for us to say, hey, go spend a week. And they come out of it saying, wow, I didn't know that this person did this, this, and this. Or, hey, that's a skill set. You know, I don't know how to measure tool and, you know, or I don't know how to measure dies specifically. How do I get some training to go do that? And so you start opening the door for some of these skill sets. And again, you allow some career progression internally. Another is the rotational program. You know, we've all heard it, stretch assignments. Go work on a cross-functional project. It's pretty much all of us are involved in that today. But again, how do you continue to identify those opportunities, put people in the right position to be successful, and allow them to be acquainted with the company? You know, I talked earlier about the failure I had as a manager with the electrical engineer who was an SME. You know, we can all be SMEs, but when you put a bunch of SMEs in a silo and say, hey, you just know your job, you lose that collaboration and you lose that ability to work together and be nimble as a company. You know, if you're operations, you may be sales one day, you may be NPD, and why not spend the time today to start learning that business and have an understanding of what you're walking into? And so that's where the rotational program can be very beneficial. And we've done that quite a bit throughout the organization.
All right, well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So it sounds like either maybe you had a blueprint or something?
No, not at all.
You didn't have, oh, okay, so kind of guessing and trial and error. Well, how have you personally pursued this learning and development acumen?
It's a deep
right?
question, Kimberly.
I know,
Deep
well.
question. Look, I think as leaders personally, you need to look at others at what they do better than you maybe, or what they do differently. I could think through my career, you know, I've always looked at what I always call mentors. Maybe not formally mentors, but someone that you work with that say, wow, this person has a skill set that I admire. They do really, really well. And then find opportunities to ask them questions, be curious, and take on that position of I want to learn. You know, that's where the learning is continuous. For my example, you know, I think of a CFO that I work with right now. You know, he can be in the room and talk sales, finances, operations, and he knows to seamlessly transition without stepping on any toes. For me, I sit in the room and I'm very confident in operations, but I'm not as confident in the finance side. And so how do I have a better understanding of, as a leadership position, having a seat at the table and having input on things outside of just the core operations? And so, again, I think that's an example of me looking at opportunities to continue to expand my learning. Those of you that work in the Aberdeen facility, they have a general manager there that is very good at knowing employees. They'll walk around the floor, shake hands, know your sister, your wife, your daughter, what you wore to Halloween. And that's a challenge for a facility that's 180 employees. And again, I look at that skill set and man, I really want that. And so I just challenge you as leaders, as you sit in positions and you're next to colleagues and peers, or you go on YouTube and see someone that says something in a TED Talk, be curious about it. Take the initiative to go find some personal learning, but most importantly, apply it. It doesn't do you any good to just learn something, do a quick VLOOKUP on an Excel spreadsheet and say, nailed it, right? You gotta do a little bit more. And so again, for me, that's how I personally expand my horizon, is looking to peers to say, hey, what skill sets do they have that I wanna be better at?
Absolutely. So a lot of self-awareness, some of those attributes I know that Jen talked about, and the emotional intelligence and that key concept for leadership. So we have another poll. Well, more of this is kind of just getting your thoughts. To think about someone who you admire as a leader, and what's that one characteristic that they possess and that something you personally want to develop. And so we'll take a moment and see if that word, energy. Oh, these are great. We'll actually share this word bubble with you guys. Anything stand out to you, Mark?
It's moving a little too fast for me.
Okay, it's moving.
I won't lie.
Empathy is...
My LASIK is kicking in right now as I'm trying to read all these words.
This is
Active
awesome.
Listening, patience.
Yeah, patience.
Patience, not a good virtue of mine.
Yeah, it's things that we all need to work on. These are great. So while this bubble is growing and increasing, and if we can go back to it.
I'll keep it open.
All right. I got one last question.
Kimberly.
Before we open it up to the floor, because I know you guys have questions burning questions that you have to ask. What advice would you give us when applying and sustaining learning as a people leader?
All right, so my advice is, I think I've said it a couple times, but just make a commitment to it. You're not gonna have an 8-hour day to commit to people development, people learning. But you may have 10 minutes here, you may have 20 minutes there. You may identify the individual that needs help, or the individual that, hey, I really wanna grow their skill sets because I think I have a position in the future. The other is understand where the business is going. For us, it's digitalization. I've never had to think about hiring an operations technology or an electrical engineer with CNC and programming background. I've never had to think about it until this year. This year I was like, well, if this is the way our strategy is going, I better make sure I go find those skill sets, and let's start internally first. Because we know how long it's going to be to find someone external, and find an operations technology specific is challenging. And so know the direction of where your department is going or the direction of the company is going, and identify those skill sets that you need for the future. This also means allocating budget to sustain learning and development. It's not just well, I'm gonna throw 10,000 because I need to send this person to Lean Academy and I'm good after that. It's a long-term investment, and you have to be committed to that moving forward. The last is remain engaged. We talk about, being involved in your employees and knowing what their aspirations are, and knowing, when they've kind of hit their plateau. Look, burnout's real. We're all been doing a lot these days. You just need to be aware of, hey, when is an opportunity to put something more on his or her plate? When is there an opportunity to get them involved in rotational development or mentorship and things like that. And you won't know until you have a one-on-one conversation, or you won't know until you observe that person and see when the right timing is for development. But be committed to it and make time. And so for me, the 3 words that I'll throw up behind me is again, be dedicated to it. It's not a piece of your job. It's not a, well, I'll get to it when I have time. You know, you should leave over the next couple days and have some energy, I saw it in the word there, to make this a continuous thing, to be real about, hey, this is a purpose of mine as a people leader to develop people. The other is creativity. Look, what I shared today, it's not going to work for everybody, but be creative. Throughout my career, it's one thing I've done fairly well. I've done Plinko boards. I've had a skee ball in my operations. I've done human battleship. Every single one of them, I'm like, there's no way this is going to work. And then you get out of it, and someone takes something out of it of, this is really cool. I love the competitive spirit. I love the fact that we're collaborative and teamwork, and now I work, right? You just start having those conversations. And so be creative. Come up with ways that are outside the normal way of doing learning and development. You know, as a company, as an organization, we will give you the tools, and we will set some blueprints up. But it doesn't mean you can't go on your own and find opportunities to really impact an individual significantly. And then the last is knowing your people. And I said last, even though I just said it a minute ago, but it's just knowing your people. You know, find time to allow them to be independent thinkers. You know, when we're all subject matter experts, we tend to kind of stuck in that lane of subject matter expert. And as leaders, we can help get those individuals out of that lane and do things differently. And that's where, you know, the secret sauce is. That's where people start working together. They're innovative, they're collaborative. At the end of the day, you're setting up success for the business moving forward.